before we go into the nitty-gritty, I would like to ask the three gentlemen whether you would like to react immediately to Professor Kauffeld's presentation, or are there any reactions, any comments? Do you want me to start? I really enjoyed the presentation. I would like to talk to you about this once again later on, because we also have to take some action in this regard. Okay, great. So you think you need to take action in your own corporation. That's exactly why we're here. So this is actually happening. Wonderful. Mr. Miller, yes, I'm fully on your page. This was really an exciting presentation. I'd like to get into contact with you in order to find out whether or how such a project could be carried out in our factory in Trotzdorf, because this is what we've learned ourselves. If you want to bring about the project of digitization, you have to have people in those positions. You can't just do it from the top to the bottom, but rather have people working in the middle in order to roll out these projects. Yes, there are a lot of interfaces, a lot of similar experiences that we've made, similar to our colleague from the Technical University. Thank you. That's exactly what it's all about. We want you to get into contact. That's why we had the trade fair. I would like to ask a couple of questions now. I'd start with Professor Kauffeld again. You have given us a statement. Transformation processes, in order to design them, personnel development and organizational development have to be intertwined. That's sort of the guiding motto. We already talked about the question of social partners, and you have referred to the situation that we have in Germany. Lots of bad things are said as regards Germany, but when it comes to social partnership, we're not that bad off. We have a certain culture of talking to each other in industry, of negotiating with each other. A bit of an anecdote: in the 1990s, there was an international mechanical engineering company, machine tool manufacturer, owned by Americans. I had to do with a consultant from Chicago who gave advice all over the world. He said, it took me 10 years to understand what you were doing in Germany, but once I understood how much money you save and how many problems you can do away with, I was quite impressed. With us, people are fighting, and then there's a big problem. Initially, you're negotiating behind closed doors about collective bargaining agreement. Production goes on. But now, back to your point. We have certain methods, we have legal rules, traditions in co-determination with social partners. Is that enough for what we're faced with, or is it a basis where something is missing? What's your idea? Well, program was developed with a co-initiative of the social partners. They were closely involved and they accompanied everything. And I have to say it worked really well from both directions. And even now, if I take a look at it, when we start, then the managing directors become attentive, and works councillors also work with us, or members from the unions who promote it and who support it, and also works councillors who become active themselves. So I think it worked quite well, and at the moment I see that the unions are pretty strong. They think about the long-term situation of workplaces, and they bring in their ideas. So that with this subject, this is one of the pros. So we have a good culture that you can work with. Now, any reflections from your group? I actually have a similar outlook. I wanted to talk about the business management. We had a seminar on cybersecurity recently. With a growing level of digitalization, this is becoming more and more important, and it became clear cybersecurity is a matter for the boss. It should not just come from the employees, it actually has to come from the top, and the motivation has to be given by the top people to the employees. Thank you. That's a first reflection for each and every person. I would now talk to you about your specific roles and ask you questions, and afterwards we can have a joint discussion. Specifically, I would like to talk to Mr. Miller. You have brought along a statement saying at an early point of time you have to bring bring society to new developments and technologies because people are responsible for the success. Now, on your project, we'll hear something later, so you can't really tell us everything now. But maybe you can give us a bit of an appetizer for your presentation. What about your project? Well, my project, or our project, is about how 5G technology can be used in an industrial context. We want to do research with real-life applications that gives support to employees in their activity in the job. So it's not digitalization as a means on its own, but concrete examples are to be researched, which in a best case can be made useful in the future. Do you want me to elaborate a bit? Yes, give us a couple of sentences. Well, I would like to present the project later on, but what is very interesting in the project that we have we are 7 research partners, 2 of them are here. We have someone from a company. That is not always the case, that the people take the time and the resources and the capacities. And we have someone who takes a look at labor science side of things to find the common ground, because for us it's important that the users of the research project work with it and don't get additional burden placed on their doorstep, and at the end it would just end up in the drawer if that were the case. Thank you so much. And now I would like to go to Mr. Odenthal. You represent those who we want to reach out to, the core of the German small and medium-sized industries. So we're very pleased to have you with us. And question to you is this: you are a family-led small or medium-sized company. What was the motivation for you to participate in it? It's not a completely everyday matter from what I know about SMEs. So why did you do it? It's extra work. Well, first of all, quite honestly, it came because our boss, our managing director, wrote his doctoral thesis on Fraunhofer in Aachen. So there was the experience available, what kind of additional value it can bring. So that kind of experience was there. And colleague and I were asked, there were 2 work packages in the project, as to whether I'd be willing to participate in the project that we're here. And I'm a fan, I'm a supporter of digitalization. And I'm at an age where you want to have a say in it, so I was immediately involved, and bringing together the individual partners where everyone brings in their own competences. That's very interesting. I think Alex will tell us something about it. So for us, it was very clear to say, yes, we'll get involved. Now, without talking too much, can you give us some idea as to how this was discussed? Were there some people who were against it? 5G-wise, 5G technology, oh yes, we had that. Initially, people said 5G will kill all of us because of radiation. Well, that is, of course, not the case. But still, in our company, everyone is pretty open. Also, when it comes to innovation and new technology, we build special machines. Every day we have new requirements and new challenges. So basically, we were all open towards it. Still, it was a completely different type of work from a scientific point of view, with the business incubators, with the city councillors. We were available for panel discussions. But once we were on away, it worked quite well. Thank you so much. In order to ask one last question, or 2 rather, the one question would be, how did you board on employees for the project? Were there specific measures, information, events, or how did that work? Or did you get into touch with people directly? Well, in our company, it's a lot about direct contact. We have personal contact. So, of course, you first of all picked out the guys where you thought, well, it could be interesting for them because they come from that walk of life or because they're dealing with it, and then we talk to them and say, look, we're going to do this, that, and the other thing. Would you be interested in participating in this? Would you want to be involved? And many said, well, no, that's nothing for me. Others said, yeah, great thing, I'm in. Now, the last question, it's an ongoing project, but can you give us examples for where the project provides you with new opportunities as a company? Well, yes and no. What we hope for the project to bring us, that's what I can say. What we are dealing with is augmented and virtual reality. And one part, without disclosing too much, one part of that is that remotely I can give instructions to someone who is abroad, and we're using the digital twin from our design, from the machine, where we have a CAD model that is going to the local machine is transposed, and you meet in a virtual room, and that's the interface where you work. So our employee does no longer need to be available in person. You only send the hardware away and give people instructions there. So you save time, resources, mileage, air miles, and if possible, you can be at home right on time with your family. We hope for a lot of additional value, and currently still very few use points. The people who we have on board see the advantages, but those are the people who have experienced what it's like to go out and do service abroad. But with the others, it will be coming as well. Something else which you have to be clear about, it's only a tool, just like any other tool. It is not a panacea for everything. You have to find out how you establish it for yourself and in your company, and you need to tell people how to do it. You can't just throw technology at people and let them do it. No, people need to be able to be involved. Right, thank you. That's a good fit into the discussion as we had it so far. Later on, Angela Meyer from KIT will tell us something about immersive technologies. So that was quite a nice outlook. Now, in order to finish the round, we have Mr. Bau. You do the scientific evaluation of the project. Are there initial findings or preliminary observations that you can talk about here? Yes, we have such observations and findings, and they are food for thought, and they raise hope. And I'd like to pick up on what the previous speaker said. How do people go along? Of course, there are the people who are curious, the ones who are reserved, the people who reject it. And it has been our task in the project, in a design thinking process, to take people along and to prepare them for changes and to allow them to have a say. This was not exactly trivial, and it's not trivial for such big research projects. Labor science, work science social sciences play a major role. It's rather desirable. Since 2007, we've been working on the issue of good work, and we see that innovation projects only work when the complex process is accompanied scientifically, and when we do so on a long-term basis. You need to know what are these success critical factors. An employee in a company is in the context of the social labor system. They will always ask, what does the change mean for myself, for my workspace, for my colleagues? What kind of experience have I come up with, good one, bad one? All this forms the attitude of the employee towards change management processes. It was important to see that and take everyone along. Professor Kaufeld has said that the step from personnel development towards organizational development is the decisive step in all this. And we look into people and technology and organization. We've been working with this type of concept for 30 years, and we found out that participation works. It's a promising success, but mainly, and I come to the first evaluation result, even with those people who are rather restrained and reserved, it makes sense, and they are starting to move, and it works if it's substantial participation. But often we only have kind of alibi participation. There's a lot of communication as to what the target is, where it should go to, and why it's all great for people. That's not convincing. To communicate well what kind of targets there are, that's important, but what is even more important, real life participation of the new concrete areas of work, because even every new technology makes for a change in the work situation. We were able to see that with the forklift system that is provided with sensors, for example. We had the various stakeholders, the drivers, workshop planners, and we brought everyone on one table and talked to each other. What would be good? What kind of thing could we change? What does it help individual people in their work? And lo and behold, all of a sudden there was a lively discussion and people were able to agree on certain matters. Great. I went through the round of speakers, and what I want to ask you, if you want to talk to about one of the statements that the other speakers made, please tell me so. But I'll give a question into the round of panelists. Mr. Bau gave an example for something that told us how you can destroy such processes with non-substantial participation. So if you just announce something where there are participation opportunities which really do not exist, then you create scorched earth, and it would be worse as if you haven't done anything. Do you have further examples for drastic risk factors for such transformation processes? Anyone? Well, what I know from the business or entrepreneurial world is the high degree of fluctuation that we have today. Employees, in particular, when such processes are happening, and if there are lots of positions in the company where people leave when projects might fail because there are no people behind them that could take on the job. That's a major risk because the lack of skilled workers is a fact. And something else which I was aware of in the project as to how important it is that you have experts from the scientific world with you, people who can get you the psychological take on things, that you take people along. I found it strange that you said people above the age of 50 were enthusiastic about it. I don't know. I know it from my own experience. It is more difficult, quite definitely so. Many people are against it, and I think in that age segment it's rather the case, or maybe you tell us something about it. That's my experience. And work on it with a certain method so that the change can happen no matter what age, and that you can do that together. That's something which has become evident in the project, that's important. Yeah, I would like to come in here directly. We have to take the 50-plus people on board, otherwise the whole thing will fail. With a view to the demographic change, we do have that situation. So without the 50-plus guys, we won't be able to come to terms with it. And the best thing would be to handle them well. But you have to say, people 50-plus, these people do have a lot of digital experience. Let's not delude ourselves. Since the 80s, latest digital tendency has been started. In the 90s, we had the internet, so there are lots of touch points, and we notice that in practical terms. It's not always those people that are blocking everything. It's more important that the previous experience was positive so that you can integrate people well. If they had been negative, then with people above 50, you have a bigger problem than with younger people. That's quite clear. I thought you might feel provoked and say something. Yes, two comments on this. The one thing I believe, something which we really need in the companies, we need to activate the older people so that they stay, that they want to stay for a longer period of time. And the older ones are possibly those that have a bit of an idea what they want to do, what is meaningful, what is not meaningful. and where we have to see what kind of tasks can they move forward, what is motivating for them. In the near future, we'll have a huge wave where people like I will come into the organization and talk to older people, telling them what has to be done for them to stay longer. And once you do that, you can you know about it, and you can give them meaningful work and projects that they can actually do something and work, continue to work with people. That's one thing. And two, I like resisting employees, people who don't want to do it at all, and for hours on end they tell me why things are not working. Why do I love these people? Well, because there is a certain level of energy there, and I only need to take this energy and convert it, and that's much easier as if I have someone there who think it doesn't matter at all. So, this resistance, see that as something positive. That's the first thing that you need to do. And then try and find out how you can move around and work with them. I saw lots of employees who afterwards were the biggest promoters, the biggest supporters, and went through the company where before we thought, oh my God, how will this ever work? How will this ever work? So that needs to be doable. I'd like to talk about it. I understand Luca's experience, but from my own experience, I have to say, and particularly when you're on trade fairs, maybe not professional trade fairs where people have a technical background, but with trade fairs where the public comes, where general society comes, youngers, and very often also older people come and say, what is this? They're very skeptical. And if you don't do finger pointing, but if you take them along and ask and talk about their questions and don't have the top-down view, but if you tell them, oh yeah, you're right, I didn't think about it, then they open up pretty quickly. So very often I had discussions which initially were very negative, and then in the end people said, oh, I want to take along a flyer. This looks really interesting, what you're saying. Briefly, interim conclusion. We were just about to say what's something that can go wrong. Something that can go wrong is a non-substantial participation, a pseudo participation of employees that creates more damage. You, Mr. Odenthal, reacted and said fluctuation can be a big problem, but then you can turn the whole thing around and say, well, in times where employee loyalty gets more and more important, a major effect of what we're talking about is here that this way you can actually create loyal employees. One should not lose sight of that. You won't only have better solutions. Professor Kaufeld gave a couple of examples. You also have loyal employees, and there's hardly anything that's more important. Still, I would like to come back to the problems. We have wrong participation promises, challenges because of fluctuation and demographic change. What other risks are there, or maybe errors that can be committed and that make what we want to achieve rather null and void? Well, I could give you one example. 2 or 3 weeks ago, for an assembly job, I was in Peru, and the infrastructure, electricity and internet is really sparse. You always have to see what we develop here in Germany. We are really role models. And when we bring this technology and want to use it to other areas, we should never forget where we are. We are very much in the front, although it says here we are ranking number 14. Globally, we should want to go to top 4 or 5, but we should never forget where we come from. It's really not self-evident where we are and what we have. In Peru, for example, I talked to one of our partners, and she said, well, we had the HoloLens from Microsoft. HoloLens, we send it back. We don't have internet. It doesn't work here. And I thought, well, okay, so with you, that's the problem in digitalization. Of course, that's a completely other, it's quite a stark example, but still one must not lose sight of it. Directly on this, we're ranking 14, that's true. We have another project where we talk about using technology for care, for outpatient care. And we see when it comes to a documentation system, it doesn't work. When Wi-Fi doesn't work, or with customers not having Wi-Fi, then you can't have communication system in place, or sensors to detect people falling down. So we are almost in desert when it comes to to the countryside. That's why we are ranking number 14. In other areas, of course, we're better. I would like to come back to another point. There is a kind of vague fear with young and old people on digitalization, and research has shown it. People ask themselves, how transparent do I become with my activities and my performance? And that is a huge problem. And in our meetings, we were confronted by this. The surprising thing for me in the discussion with technical developers, managers, and employees, take, for example, the drivers of forklifts that were equipped with sensors, the surprising thing was that once it became clear what the data, what meaning the data have for others that are transferred, that they make their life easier, and where my work life might be easier, that all of a sudden then a consensus appeared on data protection. I had not seen that before in discussions, but it shows that the way you proceed, you need to do that. It needs to be complex, and all the sides have to come in with their targets and expectations. If that doesn't work, you have people who will move major obstacles in your way, block, and very often those are managers. But that's just a further issue, this vague fear, because people don't know what happens with the data at the end of the day. We discussed which data are being generated, how are they being structured, aggregated, they're used in an individual way, and all that was transparent. At the end, we only had green dots, everyone was okay.
Bezogen auf die Technik, finde ich sehr gut, vielen Dank.
Transparency with a connection to technology. I'm glad that you're addressing the transparency, which, people in Germany pay a lot of attention to. I enjoyed the example that you mentioned in the beginning. How can I see it? How can I use it? The use of data donations, if you will, just to enable others to work with it. I think this is a good way to handle it, a good example for it anyway. Are you aware of any other examples or obstacles having anything to do with the data protection issue? With new digital works, this is something that's always on the agenda, I imagine, but anyway. Well, new resources are always used in the field of cybersecurity as well, which is also tightly connected to data protection. So if a company now are willing to implement processes on a digital level, they also need to be willing to implement new guidelines, which may be passed now or introduced in the future, to implement those as well, which might cause some hesitation because those are, this requires manpower, effort, and so on. It also entails costs, of course. Regarding data protection, data security, Mr. Odenthal, data security, of course, is a massive issue. It was a bit of a bottleneck in our project too. When it came to the models, the construction of our machines, of course, they contain our knowledge, our expertise. So if this ends up in people's hands who want to imitate it or reverse engineer it, then of course that's problematic. At one point we required cloud rendering, so we thought about how can we do it. Are we going to use a Fraunhofer server, one of ours? We knew that we're not going to use AWS, of course, because it might leak. That much was clear, but especially in mechanical engineering, this is certainly an issue. The data needs to be protected, because if it leaks, then you're pretty badly off. Just a follow-up question, a quick commercial in this case. I think this is ethically that's fine, because all of this is open access, all of this is open source. We published some documents on the questions which we were discussing just now, so if you'd be interested to have a look at the IIT website, you will find a whole array of publications in German and in English looking into those questions from different perspectives. I was triggered by what you said just now, because of course this topic is included in many different topics. How do I treat hyperscalers? How can I get away from it? Edge computing, is that potentially an option? And the question back to you, reversely, you have a conclusive, a definitive version. On the other hand, we have discussions on open innovations. So how do you think about this as a company, or do you not tend to merge those two issues? Spontaneously, I would say that I'm not seeing it, because open innovation, well, in certain areas, of course, it is suitable. For instance, what we're doing at the moment, this is an open research project. There's exchange, of course, but when it comes to our machines, I would say definitely not, because at the end of the day, somebody has to foot the bill. So the data, of course, it's a sensitive issue. It's a bit touchy. So once you've agreed to carry out a research project, we will research the technology, yes, but other than that, I would say my answer would have to be no. The past 2 years really showed us how quickly you might, the words geopolitical balance might be upended. So if your server is located in a position which is sensitive, I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. I think it's a good idea to have your servers locally, or at least within your own region. If I may take a step back, I enjoyed your example from Peru. I thought that was very interesting because it showed us two things. One, very basically, is that it's always good to look beyond your own country, which is even better than some introspection. The last book that we published also had a chapter from a colleague in South Africa working at a black university in South Africa, and many questions come up in a different way. So it might not just be internet access, but even access to electricity in the poorer regions. So it gives you a different impression. And reversely, this came up earlier when we speak about industrial cultures, where when you have a look at them from the outside, you might identify strengths, which you have yourself, which at your own table, where you're always critical about your own capabilities. This is something that we tend to neglect and something that we ignore. We found that we have the technological side, where we're not doing too badly. You mentioned the industrial culture, which is a culture of cooperation within the companies. So if I may ask this question a bit more broadly, do you see strengths? Well, in the case of Germany, yes, definitely. I would like to mention something that has not been addressed. When we speak about people and technology, and as well as organization, well, for me, this was a bit of a highlight of the conference in 2017, BIMS, bringing technology to the people. And on stage, what always happens did happen. We need to bring people to technology. I think that's the mistake. You need to carry technology to the people. What do those people look like? That's another question. How far are they integrated in their work processes, in the work processes that are designed in a certain manner already? People are already burdened, and analyses were carried out. And this is something that becomes important within this German context. We have a paragraph 5, of work protection, psychological assessments that have to be carried out. This is not just mandatory, but we also tell you the story that you should really make the best of it. So from the individual view to actually enhance your organization, you should really take up this opportunity, this psychological assessment, in order to improve your company and your technology. So we should avoid to look at technology as a tool that will help us to improve everything. It won't, but it can improve the context within which you find yourself. It can be an amplifier. And then it's going to work. But we're doing fairly well in Germany, I would say. I'm going to leave my role as a host, but I would like to make a contribution, rather, as a participant. We carried out a project where we treated the question, and I think Gina Glock helped us answer that question. She's going to speak about it later on. It was the question of the innovative capabilities of German companies. And within this project that was carried out for the European Commission, we analyzed to what point the design of work processes are even spoken about by European states when they support research. And it was a bit disappointing. This is something that was only done in Germany and to a certain extent in Scandinavia, to even ask these questions. Questions that seem obvious to us. Apparently, they're not asked in other cultures. So that was a learning. Not in the English-speaking sphere, nowhere else. And this is something that we should export as a German model. And I think that's great. Yeah, that's a great idea. We should take off our black glasses and actually look at the positive sides, the positive aspects. Do any of you feel like adding something to this discussion? We have enough time, actually. You asked us earlier whether we see any more potential in Germany, or is your colleague going to talk about this? Do not feel restricted by the agenda. Feel free to speak. I do believe that in Germany we have a lot of potential, but this is just my personal opinion. We need to move away from all of those discussions, from talking, but we need to actually act. Because I think we're at a point where, well, back in the day, Germans would produce perfect machines, very elaborate, perfect machines, but we're in such a fast-paced time nowadays that if we continue with this approach, somebody else is going to be quicker than we are. We need to look at the market's feedback, and then we can improve our machines. So there is a lot of potential, but there needs to be a shift towards the actual doing, acting. I really enjoyed you're putting this into context. We shouldn't be arrogant, of course. Thank you very much. If I compare this, whenever I speak to colleagues from the United States, well, I think that we have a decent culture of cooperation between universities as well, universities and companies. People listen to each other, solutions are found, and there's a mutual interest in knowing about what other people do, and we work together on research projects. However, I would agree with you. We need to actually act. I agree. So a lot of the time, whenever we find ourselves in projects, we need to elaborate solutions. And the question always is, how do you keep developing these solutions? And I think there's a lot of potential in Germany to pick these up, to keep developing them, and to get them to the market together with other companies. And of course, bureaucratically, sometimes, we create obstacles that wouldn't have to be there. I agree. I saw it within this project, and all of those projects, of which there are many in the area of 5G, not just within the industry, but also in health or in agriculture. There's a lot of cooperation between scientists and companies. This is promoted as well. And it would be positive, and I agree with Lucas at that point, if something came off it, if the idea was actually converted into a practical solution. So yes, I agree. We actually need to act, maybe found a startup or do something similar. Any further thoughts on this? Because otherwise I would have 2 more questions to everyone. I'm trying to wrap up this discussion for the time being, of course, because this will continue. I'm trying to summarize things, so I will pick up certain aspects that were mentioned already. But I would like to condense it. If there was one major important message that you would like to highlight, which you would recommend to SMEs, and you had to pick just one message to SMEs as to how transformational processes, by the example of 5G or whichever might come to your mind, which is the one message you would like to transmit to them very quickly? Ms. Kaufeld? Start by training change managers to dare. This is similar to starting, but I think that's an even earlier stage. You have nothing to lose, you have everything to win. Take the time to invest, reduce burdens, improve, get ahead. I understand what you're saying, and I agree. Now, for a moment, we're going to have a look towards the outside. I mean, this was a lot of introspection. We looked at the companies and the cooperation networks, for which you have some great examples, very typically German, this trio which we have on the stage. For a moment, I would have a look at the outside and reduce the amount of introspection. So if you could wish for something that promoters, this could be political institutions, could be foundations, could be associations, municipalities, whichever. So institutions that offer subsidies or that could offer some promotion, what else could they do in order to support SMEs. I mean, the bigger companies have other resources, but SMEs in particular, what can they do in order to support them in transformative processes? Improve the infrastructure, of course, improve the internet, because sometimes it's very hard in the German countryside, and this is very important for this transformation, because when it comes to healthcare, for instance, if you can't use wireless networks, then you're out. Promote further training, qualifications. This is very important, but it can be improved upon, and the companies should also finance these programs. This should be rolled out in different industries. Mr. Odenthal, I don't actually have the expertise to make a comment. I heard about the research projects, of course. We have different projects that are ongoing, and I would say that we have made some very positive experiences. I think we're on the right track, to be honest. Reduce red tape, more complex issue, communicate them in a way that's less complex, reduce complexity, and involve companies. What I have to say is very similar. Whenever I work together with SMEs, they often say that they enjoy working together with me, but leave me alone with all of that red tape. I think there's a lot to be improved on. And the task would be to link up those companies with research capabilities. Thank you so much.